Yes, indeed it is. Once again, time for the Kanika Lifestyle Podcast, Oak Island Weekly Edition. I am your host, Kenny, and I am joined by the one, the only, Nika. Good morning, Nika.
Hello, Kenny, and hello to our returning listeners for updates on the curse of the Oak Island and the continuous treasure hunt.
Thank you for coming on this journey with us as we follow the treasure hunt with the Lagina brothers, because that's really what the Curse of Oak Island is all about. We get to watch this treasure hunt through their eyes, so to speak, and then the eyes of those they've brought with them, which is seems to be a really tight-knit group. We got a really emotional speech at the end of this episode from Rick Lagina. I would say the spiritual head of this entire mission.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And Marty's more of the brains and more of the business logistics side of the operation between the two of them. But Rick follows his heart and Marty follows his head. To make a long story short.
That's how it should be.
But I felt like this episode was kind of like half interesting and half history lesson, if you will. It didn't really bore me, though. I kind of was into it, and it was good to get some recap on all these different theories and stuff.
Good to bring back the stories that they want to explain while the episode is playing, because there's so much information.
Totally, with all the different time periods and where and when people were there and
what fits with what, who did what, and when.
Exactly. So it's been interesting. I would say the episode as a whole did hold my attention, and I think as a season, as we are getting probably like close to more than halfway through at this point. I think it was episode 11. I mean, I think it goes through like April or so, end of March, early April. So I don't know how much more we're gonna get this season, but they do seem to be zeroing in on some things. We've been talking the last few weeks about the money pit, the swamp, and lot 4 and 5. And that was where we were again for the duration of this entire episode. We actually picked up right away in the money pit. We had Charles and Terry there, and Alex, who is Marty's son, joined them. And they basically are...
This is the location of the potential chapel vault.
That's what I got from this, is that this H.25 10.5 borehole is potentially the location of the chapel vault, and they're hoping at least that that's what this is. They keep bringing up weird chunks of wood and specks of things that look man-made and disturbed underground. I wrote down that they cut away to Marty at the end of this segment, and they were talking about, like, we think this is the chapel vault or something like that. The crew outside was talking about that. Let's hope this is the chapel vault. And then it's like they cut to Marty in studio, and it's like, God, I hope so. And it's like, yep, typical Marty. He's got a lot of patience, that's for sure.
He does. And they've been digging holes around this whole area. And now that I feel like they finally zeroed in on that location, because they did find that hidden shaft, the other shaft that was built prior to the previous excavations. So they are tap dancing around this big treasure. And now if they want to take it to the next level, they have to bring this big ass.
Yeah, they talked about this at the end, this Cassion. After this initial table setting intro, we move over to lot 4 and 5. And there we have Gary and Peter. Peter is the nephew, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Gary and Peter are there searching with the metal detector. And then we kind of also get a lot 5 recap here of like the beads and all the stone structure that they found and some of the metal objects that have been basically tied to this William Pips, right? Sir William Pips, who they come from like the village that he was born in. That's what I took away from this? Because I've been kind of wondering how those pieces were connected.
This is the archaeological dig where they have that stone structure that was originally thought it was from Fibs. And then
Pips.
Right. But then it also ties it to Anthony Graves.
Well, I wrote here that those metal objects that they found on Lot 5, they showed the quadrant picture of the four of them. And this is because, again, they're recapping what they previously found.
Yes.
But this is the first time I wrote down that they were scientifically linked to the birthplace of William Pips. And this guy is who went to recover Spanish treasure, right?
Yes. He
Okay.
was the OG.
On behalf of England.
Yes, he was the naval ship captain. He was also English politician or some kind of a higher status person. He found the Spanish Armada treasure, the ship that was called
The Concepcion. Yes, the Concepcion.
Concepcion, yes. And he found the treasure on that ship and brought it to the Oak Island.
It's all very confusing as to how things wound up where, I guess. Things are matching up with the time period. Things are matching up with, like, the village where he came from. There's obviously something happened here before the year 1700, I think it's safe to say, with everything that's been excavated.
But this is also where Gary found that copper plate.
So he found that on Lot 4.
Okay,
which is next to Lot 5.
Okay,
it's in the same spot, and this is they get this looked at later, so we'll get to that later. But at the time, he kind of speculates that it's a belt plate, and that it would be for like a satchel or a uniform, and some possible connection to iron tools. Speculates that it has military decorations underneath. Anyways, from here, they go to the swamp, and this is, to me, one of the most interesting things that's been going on lately is there's this, like, basically box that was clearly man-made, just sitting here waiting to be found in this swamp. This is the part of the show that makes me wonder, what is underneath my backyard, everybody?
Okay. This is a small square hole that they found.
Pretty much.
It will fit nicely some little treasure chest, if you will.
Exactly.
Because
It
you
looks
can
like a loot box.
It does. It absolutely looks like a loot box from any video game that you play or any places that you can hide smaller stuff. And it's not very deep because when Rick was standing there, it was like covering to his thighs.
Yes.
So it wasn't very deep.
This is interesting because here we had Craig and Billy and Katya there.
Yeah.
Gary Drayden's daughter, who is following in his footsteps and doing some metal detection expert work. And then Rick and Laird showed up. I wrote, that was kind of funny. But then they kind of recapped the whole Anthony Graves theory, just as to like where he had bought land on the lot and where he lived, and that he had found these Spanish coins and mysteriously was paying with them. So again, this fits in with the Concepcion theory, and I think that's why they're like really focused on that right now, is because they find something that looks literally like a treasure box or a loot box in his backyard.
Okay, that was a good place for him to observe that spot, a clear view of his hidden spot, so he could have keep an eye on it. And then Katya also found that lead counterweight.
Right, but we didn't get any research on that or feedback on that later on in the episode. So I'm hopeful that they will revisit that next week, because we didn't really get any results from the lab.
Not from that, no.
The lab results tended to focus more on Gary's belt loop, which again we'll get to in a minute. I wrote down that it was really funny to me when I forget who said it to Katya, but do you want to get in there? And her response was like, "Oh, I'll get in there." It was funny, like how she was kind of like, it was borderline defensive. Don't tread on me because I'm a girl. Like, I'll get in there. I'll do my metal detecting job. My dad trained me well. Like,
oh, really? I thought it meant more like last episode. She didn't want to get too dirty.
I guess I vaguely remember that.
So maybe that kind of corresponds to that. But either way, it was cute and kind of funny.
Yeah, that lead weight that they found, they were also speculating possibly that it could be a counterweight for a device to weigh coins, which is apparently something you needed back in the day in order to pay with a large amount. They might have to like make sure they weren't counterfeit or that the weight matched the number of coins.
And that hook that they found last time, it could be potentially holding like the scale.
It could.
And you just
Potentially.
put coins on one side and the counterweight on the other side.
Interesting stuff all around. But unfortunately, that was where they left things, because Katya was kind of convinced that this was not the bottom yet and that more water needed to be pumped out. So that's what they were doing next. And while they were doing that, we cut to lot 5 with Marty. And he was there with Fiona and Todd. And again, we didn't really get a lot of feedback here, but they were taking up charcoal. They had found some charcoal, and they had found enough, I guess, hard pieces of charcoal underground that they felt like they could get it analyzed and maybe figure out when the hell it was burnt.
Well, Fiona speculated that in 1795 there was a fire seen on the land coming from that island. And finding that charcoal right now, she said there must have been a very high intensity heat to produce that much charcoal.
Yeah, it's interesting. That is, I think, one of the first dates that's tied to the discovery of the original money pit was 1795. So her speculating about that, those dates do line up. But that's kind of all we got here. And then Marty makes comment that, like, we need to get this analyzed by Emma in the lab, and yet we did not get the results of any of that in this episode.
Do you think they're setting it up for next week?
Possibly. We'll get into the little preview as always, because that's a fun topic of its own. But from here, we went back to the money pit, and right away, one of the caissons that they bring up from the borehole, they got wood in it again. I wrote down, quote, "We got wood." I think this was at about 130 feet, and Alex is like, "We're hot on the heels right here." That was a direct quote from him. And then they bring up more wood, I think, at 139, and I also find like an open void here, or some kind of like part of the caisson is missing, and the material is looking pretty muddy and definitely disturbed. They bring over Mike to explain. I didn't write down his last name.
He's part of the crew that digs those cores out.
Yes, but he says that this is a void, or a possible void at 140. Alex wants them to go to 149, which they do, and they bring up some kind of core edge, they think, of possibly the vault. They bring Rick in to explain that they have wood to test here, that they found more wood pieces, basically, and that Rick wants to look at the original notes, and I guess if where they are is matching up with what some of those original notes say. It's such a hard thing because it is a small area.
It is.
But it's not necessarily that small.
Correct. And also, you have to keep in mind, somebody had to put that wood that deep into the ground, because 150 or 160 feet, that's pretty damn far down.
No doubt. I think, obviously, people have been looking for this treasure at different points throughout history. So when you have that much of a story passed down, it makes you wonder what's really going on here. And I do hope that they get to the bottom of it.
The cores that they're pulling out are all around the supposedly original money pit location. This is where they found that shaft. And
well, when I say get to the bottom of it too, that's what I really mean. Is I hope they get to the bottom of whether or not a money pit even ever existed. Is the whole original story even true? It's been passed down now for over 225 years.
No, we know how stories change.
Oh my gosh, just go ask your grandpa to tell you a story, and you'll hear probably more white lies than you can count. Anyways, from here we go back to the swamp, and they continue to excavate that little square area. It looks like they pumped more water out. Unfortunately, Katya finds no more metal detection signals at the bottom. I think they're kind of declaring this whole case closed at this point, that there's really nothing else to dig up from this hole. But Rick makes comment like, I wonder how many more of these little safes are hidden around the swamp. And Laird just looked so excited to be continuing to dig up people's old 1700s backyards.
He is the skeptic after all, so that's fitting with his persona.
Yeah, I thought his reaction was hysterical.
It was. They've concluded that somebody must have taken that treasure out of that hiding space.
Yeah, or if it really was Anthony Graves' hiding spot, which they kind of presumed because that was the
Right next to his
backyard of
house.
his lot.
Yeah,
It's nuts.
it is nuts. And they coming with the assumption that there are more holes like this. And I'm with them. Why would it just be one? If you find some treasure, you want to sprinkle it around in case somebody finds little, so you don't lose all of it at once.
Yeah, I suppose. We'll have to see what they find. I think whatever this is, it's clearly man-made, and
Yes.
it clearly serves some kind of function for somebody in this area, and it's not documented anywhere in like any of the hand-me-down stories about the money pit or the treasure hunt or anything like that. So it's fascinating. I mean, like,
And it's also close to the cobblestone road.
it is, yeah, and all of these other like little interesting that appear to be man-made. Like there's the eye, they call it that's a stretch for me. The comparison to the all-seeing eye of the
swamp?
Illuminati and the Templars and the Freemasons. Yeah, that's a stretch for me. I get the shape of the swamp and the location of the eye. I get it, but I do not deny that the boulders that are there making up that eye are man-made and were put there by somebody. It is weird. I'll say that much. And curious.
I buy that.
But I do hope that they keep excavating the swamp, because I think there's I once upon a time we laughed at Rick like seasons ago about why is he just hammering on this? Why is he so infatuated by the swamp?
Because the original thought was the swamp was man-made.
I get that, and I think
And
more and
why?
more it's looking like he's correct.
True. So what they were covering up with that swamp.
For sure. You take that and then you combine it with the fact that this is a island in the Northeast Atlantic, and there's of course hurricane traffic there, not every year, not every day, but it does happen. How many storms have gone through there in 100, 225 years? There's going to be a lot of disturbance to that area and a lot of things, so I feel like they got to keep working. They got to keep going as much as they can.
Well, it took them a long time to get that swamp drained. I don't know if you remember how much problems they
It did.
had with draining that whole area.
Oh yeah, I remember when they were building that big wall around it, and
Right. They try so many different tactics to get that swamp drained. And now when they do, I hope they keep digging, because there is more and more things that is popping out.
well, it looks like there's gonna be some more swamp discoveries before all is said and done, because we got some more teasers in the next time on Oka Island, but we'll talk about that at the end. Because from here, we finally got to go to the lab. And as I said, we didn't get any analysis of the charcoal, and we didn't get any analysis of any of the wood that they brought up from the money pit yet. But we did get some analysis on Gary's discovery of the copper belt plate that he described. And they also brought in Carmen, the smithy.
They did.
Yeah. I like when they bring in the smithy, because he's really skeptical. He's like the biggest skeptic of all.
But he shows up.
He shows up and gives his analysis, and he's as thorough as ever here. But I wrote down that Emma and Jack and Gary and Craig were all there with him. And apologies if I missed anybody. But Emma did some analysis on this copper plate and found that it was made with arsenic technique. Do you know what that means by any chance, when it comes to crafting and how arsenic would be used?
She said it was a part of an alloy when they combine a certain metal and they use arsenic. I don't know, some kind of a treatment.
Yeah, it must be some kind of a binding agent,
Maybe.
for metals or metallurgy.
But she also said that eventually it got phased out. Something else replaced it. They weren't
Correct.
talking about it too much.
Which pushed the date of this in her mind to the 1600s, the late 1600s, which is again this time period that fits in with Phipps.
Right, but
William
it
Phipps.
predates,
So
but it predates the money pit by 100 years.
right, which is also a good thing because I guess whoever found it would have had to be sitting for a while.
Right.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about the whole Pips theory and one of my issues with it at the end.
You got issues?
I got an issue with it,
Okay.
but I like the idea of it more and more because of you're getting like triangular points of data here. You have the Crown sending this guy to look for treasure. You have this guy detailing that he found some treasure and he's bringing it back but never really how much treasure he found. And then you have like those coconut fibers that were found on Oak Island. So some of the things are starting to point in the right direction, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I also wrote down and we have to figure out who this guy was. There's another guy with Phipps named Andrew Belcher.
That's the hypothesis.
That's his mate, or that was another ship captain that he worked with?
I think it was the ship captain because those two went for the second treasure hunt. That's where they found the excess silver and gold that brought back to England.
And this theory comes from a Freemason named Scott Clark, by the way, who was they kind of mentioned was previously on the show. There's been so many of these guys to come and go throughout the seasons, including the guy that now hosts the Skinwalker Ranch show, right?
Right.
And he's been on Ancient Aliens as well, so they get passed around a little bit, but this one seems to really be sticking with them right now. The only thing I wrote down from Rick here is he's like, we don't have a smoking gun yet. And it's like, yeah, dude, it's been 12 years. It's been 12 years and you don't have one smoking gun. That's one of my skeptical points here. It's like, damn, I know this island keeps giving, but nothing has shown me that as interesting as it all is and as fascinating as everything they're finding underground is, nothing's convinced me that it wasn't moved already. That's my issue with it.
Yeah, I don't know how they're gonna take that information if it comes true that the treasure has been moved.
Some of them.
Some.
I'll get to that. Okay. All right. Peter, Katya, and Billy are back in the swamp, and they're looking for more of this pathway. They're already starting to dig and look for more of these little well vaults. Mm-hmm. That they found over here, this little treasure vault box underground. They're looking for more of those, and they're looking for more of the old stone road, right?
Yes.
Okay. So they're not really finding much, but they do find some pottery here. There's no real feedback on any of this in this episode from the lab or anything like that. So after that, we basically go to the war room for the rest of the show, before and after the final commercial break. And here is where we get basically a decided plan of action that they're going to bring in this 7-foot caisson, right? And they're going to pick 5 or 6 places to dig?
Yes, they're going to pick 5 to 6 places. The caisson that they want to bring is 7 feet in diameter. So it's pretty large.
Yeah, and this is going to allow them to drop a big scooper through that and bring up material. Yes, hopefully they think a treasure.
That's what they are hoping. Therefore and they pointed exactly where they want to have that first initial caisson, somewhere in the middle between all these, between the chapel vault and the hidden treasure tunnel that they just discovered.
100%. And this was a pretty big meeting. Almost, it seemed like everybody important was there, including Rick and Marty, Craig, and the whole team. And we get this emotional speech by Rick here. He senses that there's enthusiasm for this Cassion and trying to solve mystery. And he kind of ends this speech. You can hear he's choked up a little bit while he's talking here. And I think he knows that a lot of people have given a lot of time and money to this. And they're kind of getting down to it, maybe. I don't know if there's a lot left in the tank of this expedition. This is year 12. We don't know how much it's cost or anything like that, except for that they're doing a lot of cool work.
They mentioned that it's going to be one of the most expensive excavation when it comes to digging. Because
you get the idea that they've sort of been saving everything they have for this moment in a sense. And if they are to come up empty-handed 100% here, that it might leave things in a weird place. Not weird, but it might just leave them in a tough place to continue.
Either that or they just gonna turn it around and say like, well, at least we know.
You never know with Oak Island. You never know. Like I'm amazed that we're in season 12.
I know.
It's hard to believe that we were there all those years ago in Chicago watching the first season on the couch and being like sort of interested. It's just fascinating.
And how the whole excavation and the group has grown.
I think my own emotions and back and forth in my own head about like, is it real? Is it not real? Is it real? Is it not? Like, I've gone back and forth on it so many times I can't count. And yet here I am today. I think more a believer than ever that something happened here with everything they keep unearthing. And like I said, it makes you wonder, what is in my backyard? What's underneath the yard that I grew up in? Like, when my parents dug the pool in the backyard, what did they find underground? Is there anything interesting that came up, even just 8 feet underground? You know, like
those are good questions.
It just makes me interested. That's
all these theories and hypotheses. That's all there is. We don't know what happened.
Home builders who break ground on new lots and excavate like basements. What comes up? Like, what don't we know about that's been found all over everywhere?
Well, we know that we built on the previous civilization or previous occupier of that space.
Yeah, I mean, between everything we're learning from Graham about the American Southwest and as early as it could have been walked on.
Exactly. Even the Egyptians, they built on top of the old civilization that lived in ancient Egypt.
Correct.
I mean, Cleopatra is closer to the
modern
world than when the pyramids were built.
Correct.
So that's a lot of chunk of time that we're talking.
And yet it's such a little blip in the entirety of what we know existence is. Billions of years. And
what could have happened in those billions of years?
Yeah, it's hard. We can't fathom projects that would take beyond our own lifetime to make.
Cannot.
And yet we have projects like that stare us in the face, that it makes that bridge hard to gap.
It's really hard for us to accept this.
And that's where I go back to Oak Island originally. Where we originally heard about it was Ancient Aliens, season 1, episode 4. I remember. And it was always described as like this hole that had wood planks every like 10 feet, right, to mark its depth. And then at one of the depths, I believe it was like 90 feet. And it makes me wonder, A, how did these guys get 90 feet underground in 1795? But supposedly they pulled up a tablet that had weird markings on it. So that's the only thing that doesn't fit with the Concepcion theory that I wanted to get back to. And my big issue with it is, how does this tablet that has these weird carvings on it that are supposedly in a foreign language, at least to whoever was there in 1795 to 1800-ish, how does that fit in with the Concepcion theory? Because I'm having a hard time with that one.
Yeah, that's a good question. I know the slab you're talking about, they did discover, and it was placed in some other place that they went to visit during the earlier seasons.
They never found it, though.
Right.
They only found that it was moved and taken somewhere. I mean, this could be part of a hoax, or it could be part of selling the illusion of that there's something there. Like, who knows?
But to your point, if this is a treasure vault or treasure anything, where's the prototype of it? This is a construction that is booby-trapped.
Yeah.
Has a lot of tunnels coming in with water and everything else that you can.
You can't just make this.
Right.
You need to. It needed to come to you from somewhere. Like, I agree, and especially when it involves the earth and the ground and like.
You got to have some knowledge about things, whether it's gonna get swept by the water next season, or is the big storm gonna come and knock everything out? How do we dig 260 feet down?
I don't know.
1785.
Yeah, I don't know.
So,
I don't know.
We don't know how the pyramids were built, so we have that too.
Of course not. But at the same, it was at one point theorized, that aliens built the hole on the money pit on Oak Island, at least on the Ancient Aliens show, because of the fact that it had these wood and the intricacy of the construction and the tablet and all these other things. And it's like, we're far away from that now. If we're talking about a British politician and a captain that went to collect known treasure, sunken treasure, and decided not to bring half of it back.
Well, how would they know if he got all of it or not? He could.
Yeah,
You know.
exactly. And it also makes more sense in a way that people might have found a hole that was looking like it was disturbed and covered up on an island.
Could have been a pirate that dug up those holes back in the day.
Well, exactly. But I'm just saying the story about the wood every 10 feet and the tablet could have grown over time. It could have become part of the wise tale aspect of it. And it might not be important at all or have any relevance on any of this. It might not have even existed. I don't know if we know. It's just wild goose chases at this point.
Do you think somebody did put some treasure somewhere on the island and came up with the other story just to deter people from looking for it?
That was another idea, was that the whole money pit was a fabrication to distract from the fact that there was actual treasure somewhere else. And then you find this box in the swamp, and that's fascinating because that looks like a place for treasure.
That looks man-made hidey hole for a loot.
All right, well, they're going to bring in this Cassion, I guess, and we're going to, I guess, get that into position. And that sounds like a big job because next time on Oak Island, which is one of our favorite parts of the show and one of our also, we have a love-hate relationship with it because it does get us excited to watch next week, but it also can be very misleading sometimes in terms of like what it sells you on and what the actuality winds up being when you watch it a week later. But I did not see any money pit digging or anything of this Cassion in the next episode, which leads me to believe that it's going to be a bigger project to set up and that they're going to be focusing their efforts more now again on the swamp and lot 4 and 5. Maybe for a week or two before we get back to the money pit and get this whole big Cassion set up for the dig.
Oh, really?
We'll have to wait and see. But I just noticed we didn't see any of that in the preview.
You are right. We did not.
But we did see the swamp. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I noticed is Doug the historian is bringing in some kind of new map. And based on the way that is edited, they make it sort of seem like there's something there almost immediately when they go and start. Just the way it's cut, it seems like they're showing them going out to these spots that Doug is showing on this map and finding that there's something there based on the way it's cut.
They did show this old map that was, well, I think they brought that map before. They had sometime before on the show.
Well, I will have to wait and see what it is, and I'm looking forward to seeing out what this is. Obviously, anything with maps and something that's real, I feel might have an opportunity to produce some real results. Like you said, if this is a treasure vault, where is the blueprint? I think the woman who died, I forget her name now.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
But she had some Templar map that had sort of spots marked on this island, and it seems like, again, we're far away from that when we're talking about now a British. And unless it was a known treasure depository spot that was passed down somehow. But who knows?
Do you think with bringing the caissons, they're going to have to bring bigger trucks?
Yeah. I think they're going to have to bring in those, like we've seen this before on the island. And
heavy duty
semis and like pieces. Like this tube that they're going to stick 180 feet underground is going to have to be brought in pieces. It's 7 feet wide. So just think about those wide loads you see on the highway sometimes. And like it's going to be like probably 10 or 12 of those. Now, luckily, it'll be in Canada, so their traffic will have to deal with it, not anywhere here in the United States. Just kidding.
True.
Until Canada becomes a part of the United States. Sorry, I can't help myself with making a little joke about that one right now. However, until that happens, that would be funny when Trump claims Oak Island next. The treasure's mine. I'm looking forward to see what happens next time on Oak Island, especially when Alex, I think it was at the end, was like, "Come see this," and then it was like, "Do." We'll wait until next time to see what "come see this" means.
I know, and also Gary found something because his metal detector.
Yeah, that was right around how it was edited. It was like beep 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 beep. Come see this. It was like, oh, I
They
want to
found
watch.
the treasure. Oh my God.
So we'll have to
Finally.
see what they find and what is getting dug up in the swamp. I saw more logs, I think, underground in the swamp when I was looking carefully at this footage.
They did show that.
But that's not metal, and that's not making the metal detector go off.
No, there was wooden planks of some sorts.
Yes, a plank or some kind of log, but it looked like it had some definite man-made stuff going on underground, and that always fascinates me from a story perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that is going to do it for this episode of the Oak Island Weekly. Did we miss anything?
I think we covered all the locations, all the people, and the move what they were planning.
Yeah, the big Cassion is the big move at the end of everything. So we'll be back next week to update if there's any progress made on that in the next episode, or if it was absent, like I'm speculating, because they didn't show any of it in the preview.
Well, this is where Rick had his emotional speech too.
Yeah, exactly. He said at the end, we all have to be our best right now, which, I mean, you can read between the lines. Like, they don't have a lot left, maybe. I don't know.
Between this being very expensive and how long it has been going on.
They might think they're really close, too.
Yeah.
I think they feel like things are starting to come together in their mind, at least. And so hopefully the data that they bring up from underground matches with what they feel like is going on in their minds. But it's good to see all of them kind of in lockstep here going forward, at least into the end of this season. And we'll wish them the best of luck. I mean, it's not going to last forever, right?
No.
All right. Well, that's all I got, Nika.
Perfect recap of the show.
All right. We will be back again next Wednesday with another recap of Oak Island Weekly for you guys. Please, until then, enjoy the show and spread the word to all the Oak Island fans or people that have yet to even discover the show. Because whether you know it or not, one of the most expensive treasure expeditions ever is going on in Canada and has been going on for the past 12 years. So whether you just watch it once or whether you get sucked into it like Nika and I have and follow this journey, I think you'll find the fact that any of it is even happening fascinating.
It is. And the history behind it.
100%. All right, everybody. We will be back with you next week. Until then, adios.